This video includes spoilers for Persona 3 Reload, Persona 4 Golden, Persona 5 Royal, and Metaphor ReFantazio, so if you want to experience those games blind, here's your heads up. Every now and then a game hits way harder than you expect. For me, the Persona series, and more recently Metaphor ReFantazio, did just that. I've now played Persona 3 Reload, Persona 4 Golden, and Persona 5 Royal 3 times each, and Metaphor ReFantazio twice. And that's honestly really rare for me. Replaying long, story-heavy games is not usually my thing. But with these, especially Persona 4, I kept coming back. Not just for the gameplay, the stylish presentation, the phenomenal music, or even the unforgettable characters, but because these games all made me think about things I didn't even realize I needed to. Persona 3 Reload was my first ever Persona game, and when I picked it up, I wasn't looking for something life-changing. I just needed something to distract myself, and had heard great things about the Persona series. That said, besides watching the trailer and seeing it was well received by fans, I kept myself as in the dark as possible about what I was getting into. I just wanted to play something with no added expectations, completely blind, that would help me escape from the loop I was in of seemingly endless job hunting. And what I found was unlike anything I'd experienced before in any video game I'd ever played. Everything about it felt different from what I was used to. The structure of the game, the storytelling, the characters, and most of all the heavy themes. It's a game about mortality and loss, but also about appreciating the present, making meaningful choices, forging real connections, and facing hardship with purpose. And all of that really resonated with me. The game's calendar system was really unique. The only thing I'd ever seen that was similar is the calendar system in Fire Emblem Three Houses. And while it was enjoyable in Fire Emblem, in my opinion, Persona had implemented it in a much better way. Every day I had to choose how to spend my time, who to hang out with, what to focus on, what to let go. And these choices not only impacted how my character grew, but how the story and other characters actually developed. I couldn't do everything, and that limitation, weirdly enough, made it feel more real. It made me think about how easy it is to let time pass without really doing anything with it. A pattern I'd fallen into in my own life without even noticing. Just drifting through days, not making real choices. But this game didn't let me do that. Every day was a decision, even if it was just a small one. And for the first time in quite a while, I realized I didn't want to keep letting my own time slip away. Another thing that really stood out was how the game handled your relationships. You're dropped into a group of strangers with no real choice but to live and fight alongside them, and these characters weren't friends by default. They became one another's support systems through awkward conversations and hard-won trust. Watching that slow growth reminded me that connection doesn't have to come all at once, and you don't have to present the perfect version of yourself either. As long as you're being genuinely yourself, it can build in the background, sometimes starting from moments that feel clumsy or uncomfortable, until one day you look around and realize you're not alone anymore. You don't really need to have all the answers to become part of something, you just have to show up and be real with people. Each member of the team, which in-game is known as C's, was dealing with their own unresolved pain. Mitsuru hides behind perfection and responsibility, Akihiko throws himself into training to outrun grief, Yukari masks her fear with bitterness, and Junpei lashes out from a deep sense of inadequacy. They're all broken in different ways, but over time, you see them soften toward each other and toward themselves. You don't just fight alongside them, you watch them become more whole. And in a story so wrapped up in death, that kind of emotional growth feels even more profound. Then, there's the much heavier question the game asks. If you were forced to confront your own mortality, if you knew exactly how much time you had left, how would you choose to live? That question is presented during the final stretch of the game when Ryoji, a key character introduced late in the game, gives you the choice. Do you want to forget everything and live in blissful ignorance until the end comes? It's tempting, safe even, but choosing to remember, to face the truth head on, is what gives you and your friends the chance to make the most of the time they have left, and to fight for something meaningful, even if it won't last forever. When I finally finished the game, it was around 3 or 4 a.m. on some random weeknight, and the game left me a little dazed at first. So much had led up to that moment, I just couldn't believe the journey was over. But as Memories of You started playing and the credits rolled, I sat with it and started reflecting on it all. Everything I'd experienced, everything these characters had faced, it all hit me and I started to cry. Not just a tear or two, but real cathartic crying. No game had ever made me do that before. And I wasn't just emotional over a game ending, I felt empty, like something had been ripped out of me. That kind of emotional fallout was completely new to me, and it turns out there's even a term for it, post-Persona depression, and yeah, that definitely checks out. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about the game. I dove into YouTube video essays, Reddit threads, spoiler discussions, anything to stay connected to the world and characters that I was not ready to leave behind. That's when I realized that this wasn't a one-time thing, and other Persona games offered similar emotional depth, each one tackling different themes with the same impactful formula, and I had to keep going. So, I jumped into Persona 5 Royal. If Persona 3 Reload was an emotional awakening, Persona 5 Royal was a full-blown odyssey. The world was bigger, bolder, more complex. Dungeons felt like living metaphors. The story tackled rebellion, identity, and injustice in bold and unforgettable ways. It still had that Persona DNA that I'd become familiar with, but it was dialed up to 11 in a lot of ways. Throughout the base game, each dungeon, or palace as this game called them, represented someone corrupt trying to bend the world to match their twisted desires. Corrupt teachers, predatory mentors, abusive parents, and power-hungry politicians. Taking them down wasn't just justice, it felt like reclaiming agency in a world that was constantly trying to take it from you. But what made those moments hit even harder was how personal they were for your team, the Phantom Thieves. You weren't just toppling villains, you were watching the team grow through these fights. Ann refuses to let her abuser define her, Futaba learns to open up after years of isolation, Yusuke reclaims his creative voice, Ryuji stands up for himself after being cast aside and labeled a troublemaker, Makoto learns to follow her own sense of justice, not just what's expected of her, Haru gains the courage to break free from a life she never chose, and even when they don't get perfect justice, their strength comes from facing their pain and building something stronger together. Then came the Royal arc, and I was blown away. After beating a literal god, it felt like the natural conclusion. But instead of rolling credits, I was thrown into something even more personal. Therapy. Except the therapist is now your final boss. Dr. Maruki wasn't a villain in the traditional sense, and he was unlike any of the other antagonists you'd faced up to that point. He genuinely wanted people to be happy. He offered a perfect world, no pain, no trauma, just comfort. In his eyes, reality didn't matter if everyone could live in a perfect world. And the twist? You get it. You understand why he's doing it, and for a moment, you wonder if he might be right. And yeah, wouldn't it be easier to live in a world where the worst things never happened? Sure. But the game hits you with that exact question. Live in a perfect lie, or embrace a painful truth. Choosing reality means accepting that the character's growth came from their struggles. It means rejecting comfort that comes at the cost of identity. Their bonds, their strength, it all came from facing their worst moments, not erasing them. The Phantom Thieves became who they are because they faced their pain, not in spite of it. Erasing that would mean erasing everything they built and grew from throughout the entirety of the game. And then there's Akechi, and his role in the Royal arc is unforgettable. After seemingly sacrificing himself in a battle with an earlier villain, you meet his false reality version created from Dr. Maruki's twisted reality, so disgusted by the idea of a fake world, so disgusted by the idea of someone else choosing his truth and manipulating reality that he'd rather not exist at all. He sees Maruki's world for what it is, a fantasy where someone else rewrites your story, and he'd rather vanish from existence than live on someone else's terms. And what really sealed it all for me was the epilogue. The Phantom Thieves are all moving on to the next chapter of their lives, some going their separate ways, and Maruki shows up again. Not as a god, not as a therapist, but as a taxi driver. Just a guy quietly trying to move forward after everything he'd believed fell apart. He'd spent the whole game trying to take people where he thought they should go, reshaping reality around his version of happiness. But now he's simply driving, letting people decide where they want to go, and helping them get there. It's symbolic, subtle, and honestly beautiful. Not a punishment, just quiet personal growth. I went into Persona 5 Royal expecting something fun, something stylish, and maybe something that could hit even half as hard as Persona 3 Reload, and what I got was something that challenged how I think about morality, identity, and the cost of comfort. It asked what it means to fight for a reality that won't always go your way, and why that's still worth it. And while the answer isn't always pretty, it was real, and that's what made it matter. Persona 4 Golden was the last of the three I played, and I'll admit I was hesitant at first. Compared to P3R and P5R, it looked much more dated, but it quickly captivated me just as the others had, and soon the older graphics and slightly older mechanics didn't bother me at all. The cast is so genuine, the voice acting is iconic, and most of all, the themes really stuck with me. The search for truth, the idea of accepting the parts of yourself that you don't like, the notion that the people who matter will love you because of who you are, not in spite of it. That message hit me harder than any of the others had. For context, I've spent a lot of my life trying to blend in, hide my real thoughts to some extent, playing down my interests, bending who I was just to be a more palatable version of myself for the people around me. And honestly, looking back, I wish I hadn't tried so hard. All that energy worrying what others thought about me, all that time I spent trying to seem normal, whatever that even is supposed to mean. To not be the weird kid with all sorts of niche interests, being the only one of my friends that liked anime, or liking such a wide variety of video games compared to the people around me, my unique taste in music compared to my friends at the time, or whatever else. All that time seemingly wasted when it could have been spent figuring out who I actually was and finding people who liked that version of me. What made Persona 4 Golden so impactful wasn't just the message, but how every single character in the investigation team was wrestling with a different version of that same struggle. And I saw pieces of myself in almost all of them. Rise felt like she had to play a role to be accepted, like who she really was wouldn't be enough without her idol image. And while I've never been in the spotlight like her, I've definitely felt the same type of pressure, the need to act like a more polished, acceptable version of yourself just to fit in. Kanji's arc struck a similar chord. The way he felt like he had to act tough and bury his more gentle or creative interests to avoid judgment, it made me reflect on my own tendencies to hide parts of myself that didn't fit others' expectations of masculinity. Yosuke's resentment of being stuck in a small town and his constant frustration with the people around him reminded me of how easy it is to feel disconnected and adrift when your environment doesn't reflect your identity. That emotional claustrophobia? Oh, I've absolutely felt that. Chie's insecurity wasn't just about being competitive. It came from feeling like she was always in Yukiko's shadow, both in femininity and in social standing. Her drive to be strong came with a quiet fear of not being enough. Yukiko, meanwhile, felt trapped by the future others had already mapped out for her. Expected to inherit her family's inn, to act a certain way, and to never choose for herself. Naoto's story hit in a different way. She felt she had to present herself as a guy to be taken seriously as a young detective. And while I've never experienced anything quite like that myself, I still resonated with the pressure underneath it. that sense that you need to hide or downplay parts of who you are just to be respected. Different situation, but same emotional weight. Characters like Teddy and Marie explore these themes in a much more literal way. Both begin the game with no memory of who they are, but where their stories go is completely different. Teddy's journey is about more than just discovering who or what he is, it's about whether he has value, whether being helpful is the only way he can be loved. He ties his self-worth to being useful and struggles with the idea that maybe people only care about him because he helps. Marie's story, on the other hand, is rooted in fear. Fear that if her memories return, she might not like who she really is. It's not about being helpful like with Teddy, it's about being acceptable, about whether she's worthy of being remembered at all. And that's why the theme of searching for truth resonated so deeply, because sometimes the hardest truths to face are the ones about yourself. Each character in their own way wrestles with the same question. When no one else is looking and the world's expectations fall away, who am I really? And that's what made Persona 4 Golden so special to me. It wasn't just one character or one arc that left a mark, it was the entire group, each holding up a mirror to a different part of myself that I hadn't fully looked at before. And slowly, piece by piece, the game helped me feel like maybe those parts weren't broken. Maybe they were just me. It's not just a fun JRPG with lovable characters, it's a reminder that hiding who you are might make life easier in the short term, but being honest with yourself is the only way to truly connect with others, and you'll be much happier that way too. That message doesn't just live in the story, it lives in every character arc, every confrontation with a major enemy, every moment the investigation team opens up to each other. So yeah, maybe it's not as flashy or intense as Persona 5 Royal, or as philosophically heavy as Persona 3 Reload, but for me, Persona 4 Golden felt like coming home to a truth I was too scared to face for a really long time. That it's okay to be me, even when I don't have it all figured out. Especially when I don't. After finishing Persona 4 Golden, I found out the team behind these games had formed a new studio under Atlus, Studio Zero, and they were working on a brand new IP called Metaphor ReFantazio. And since I was already hooked on their previous works, I had to know more. Even if this wasn't a Persona game, I was already all in on their approach to storytelling, and while I do enjoy the high school setting of the Persona games, seeing how these guys could handle a high fantasy setting had me very interested. Soon I learned the main themes of the game would be overcoming anxiety, realizing inner strength by facing the fears those anxieties create, and finding common ground with others. As someone who's dealt with pretty extreme anxiety for nearly my entire life, but has still found ways to push through and make things work, at least to some degree, this got me hyped. I'd never seen a game try to directly tackle anxiety, and not as a mechanic or stat or status effect, but as a core part of its story and characters. In an interview with the game's director, Katsura Hashino, he mentioned, "Depending on the person, fear can either paralyze someone or maybe even cause their decline, but it can also propel people forward at times too. It's a very fundamental emotion we experience as humans, and depending on how we view it, it can push us to somewhere outside of our comfort zones. That's a key concept we try to explore in Metaphor ReFantazio. Fear may sound like a simple theme, but because it's so simple, we hope people don't walk away thinking, that was a fun momentary escape, now back to reality where nothing's changed. Rather, we genuinely want people to feel something about their life, maybe even encouraged or empowered through playing this game. That's why the experience is rich and meaningful, even as entertainment, and we aren't compromising Atlus's philosophy towards RPG games, and we're still providing something new and enjoyable for our fans. That was really the end goal for us." I only found out about the game a few months before release, so I was pretty surprised by how little hype there seemed to be at first. The Persona fanbase had taken note of it long before me. Many had been waiting for this since it was first teased as Project ReFantazio back in 2016. But gradually, the buzz started growing, and as more of the game was revealed, it started gaining more and more traction. The unique art style turned heads, the character designs looked compelling, Then the story trailer dropped, and it felt like the spark had caught. You mean to tell me we were getting a Persona-style game and a unique spin on a high fantasy setting where you're on a journey to fight to become a king? Count me all the way in. A few weeks before launch, a demo released, and hype exploded. Even people who had never played a Persona game or were turned off by the usual high school setting of Persona seemed interested in Metaphor ReFantazio. Then the reviews dropped. Nearly perfect scores across the board. And shockingly, the user scores were just as high, which is not always the case these days given the growing disconnect between critics and players. But here, everyone agreed. This game was peak. It was wild to watch my most anticipated game of the year go from fairly niche to mainstream hype in such a short amount of time. People praised the gameplay, the art direction, the music, the characters, and especially the themes and narrative, for how it handled heavy topics with care, for how meaningful it felt, and for how deeply it resonated. Atlus had done it again, and with an entirely new IP. Metaphor ReFantazio didn't hit me the same way Persona 4 Golden did, but that's not a bad thing. It wasn't holding up a mirror to who I was, it was about showing me who I could become. It's a story about anxiety, fear, and uncertainty, but also about hope. About what happens when you face those fears, even when you're not ready. About choosing to move forward anyway. Where Persona felt like making peace with my past, Metaphor felt like making a promise to my future. And what stood out to me the most wasn't just the fantasy setting or the high political stakes, it was how personal everything felt. In this world, fear isn't just an obstacle, it's a living force. One that shapes people, distorts reality, and paralyzes progress. And the only way forward is through it. The game doesn't pretend anxiety disappears, it doesn't offer perfection, it offers movement, the courage to continue even when fear still lingers. That message of facing anxiety head-on felt so deeply validating, especially coming from creators I'd already trusted to tell stories that mattered. In a genre so often defined by saving the world, Metaphor reminded me that saving yourself is just as vital, and often just as difficult. You see it in the party's awakenings. Each one rips a heart-shaped microphone out of their chest and speaks into it, saying the things that they've been holding back. And not just for show, it's them finally being honest, saying what they've been too afraid to, even if it hurts. And that's what made the Book of Utopia so interesting as well. It wasn't a delusion of an ideal world to be rejected like in Persona 5 Royal. It was a dream to strive for. Not a blueprint for control, but a beacon of hope. Something to aim toward, not something to impose. The game's antagonists also reflect this theme. Some, like Rella and Forden, twist the fear and anxiety of the people into a source of power, using it to manipulate others or maintain control. They embody what happens when fear is projected outward, turned into a tool for dominance or despair. But no character captures the emotional weight of fear and anxiety like Luis. He doesn't just struggle with those feelings, he lets them consume him, until they transform into hatred and resentment. Luis isn't just the final obstacle of the game, he's the inverse of its core message. A living reminder of what happens when fear and anxiety are left unchecked, not confronted, but buried and weaponized. His story isn't one of pure malice. He's driven by conviction, shaped by trauma, and fueled by the very emotions he refuses to face. Where the main party chooses to gradually build a better world through empathy, trust, and growth, Luis chooses control. He demands transformation, not through connection, but through force. Deep down, Luis is a coward, one who fears the messiness of reality. So instead of engaging with the world, he tries to escape it. He wants to remake it in his image, instantly and absolutely. And that's what makes him so powerful and so tragic. The strengths I saw in Metaphor ReFantazio were reinforced even more when the Game Awards rolled around a few months later. Metaphor earned 6 nominations, including a Game of the Year nomination, and took home 3 awards: Best RPG, Best Art Direction, and Best Narrative, and it was beyond deserved. By the time I finished the game, it had earned a place among my all-time favorites alongside the creator's other works. And even though it wasn't technically a Persona game, I was still left with that familiar feeling, that post-Persona void, that bittersweet emptiness that only something truly special can leave behind. Looking back, I never expected JRPGs with anime aesthetics and turn-based combat to leave such a lasting impact. But these games didn't just entertain me, they helped me understand myself. They reminded me that it's okay to struggle, to feel lost, to not have the answers, and that being honest with yourself, even when it's hard, is the only way to truly connect with others. Whether it's facing mortality, standing up for what's right, rejecting false comfort, embracing your true self, or finding courage through fear and anxiety. Each of these stories offered more than just a great experience. They offered growth, comfort, perspective, and honestly, the push I didn't even know I needed. So, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like or subscribe. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this, and hopefully it came together half decent. And I'd genuinely love to hear your stories too. If any game has ever helped you guys the way these did for me, share it in the comments and let's chat about it. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go check out some of these spin-off games while waiting for Persona 4 Revival and Persona 6 if it ever decides to come out. Thank you again for watching, and bye!